I'm Teisha with Shalom TV's news update for Friday, April the 11th, 2014. The Associated Press reports that the government of Switzerland said today that the Palestinians can join the Geneva Conventions governing the rules of war and military occupations. This follows the Palestinians' applications for membership into 15 international bodies. Yesterday, the United Nations said Secretary General Ban Ki-moon accepted the Palestinian applications to join 14 conventions, among them the Vienna Conventions on Diplomatic and Consular Relations, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the Convention Against Torture. Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations Riyad Mansour said earlier this week that Palestine will officially become a state party to 13 of the 15 conventions on May the 2nd, and that the Palestinians are prepared to apply for more agency conventions and treaties depending on the actions of Israel. Israel views the unilateral steps by the Palestinians as something that pushes the chance for a peace agreement farther away, and a violation of the agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, noting that when peace efforts were renewed this past July, it was under an agreement that Israel would free 103 Palestinian security prisoners and that the Palestinians would not take unilateral steps toward statehood at the UN. Meanwhile, following another meeting between Israeli and Palestinian negotiators yesterday, Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat denied that any sort of breakthrough between the parties was close at hand. Erekat had met with Israeli chief negotiator Tzipi Livni and with U.S. peace envoy Martin Indyk yesterday afternoon, where the parties tried to reach terms that would extend the deadlocked talks beyond the upcoming April 29th deadline. Erekat told a Palestinian paper yesterday that reports of progress on those talks were not true, and that there were still very wide gaps between the two sides. And the Times of Israel reports that a senior Israeli official seemed to agree with Erekat's assessment. The official was responding to a news report yesterday from Israel's Channel 2 that said it was based on a source in Washington that said that Israel and the Palestinians were close to reaching a deal that would see peace talks extended to the end of the year. The official said that they were not aware of any such report and that they had not yet overcome the crisis, but that talks would continue. There have been rumblings in the media about a possible new agreement that would extend talks and a deal that could also include a demand that the Palestinians retract or freeze their applications to the international bodies, as well as Israel possibly agreeing to release a fourth batch of Palestinian security prisoners, including Israeli Arabs, and the possibility that the U.S. would release convicted Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard. However, there has been no official acknowledgement or confirmation of any such deal as of yet. Meanwhile, Beit HaYehudi chairman Naftali Bennett said that his party would leave the coalition if Israel goes ahead with a fourth prisoner release that would include Israeli Arab terrorists. In response to the recent violence against Israeli security forces at the West Bank settlement of Yitzhar, the IDF has decided to deploy a border police unit to Yitzhar. The border police unit will be stationed at the yeshiva of the settlement, which was evacuated overnight to allow for the unit to move in. If you recall, several border policemen were lightly injured this past Tuesday when, after going in to dismantle a number of illegal outposts at the settlement, they were attacked by a group of settlers with rocks. Tires were also burned and roads were blocked. An army post in the area was also ransacked. The IDF spokesman said the unit has been stationed in Yitzhar in light of the recent acts of violence against security forces and in order to meet security demands, saying it was now necessary to have a constant military presence at Yitzhar. The spokesman added that such violence as was demonstrated earlier this week was considered by the IDF and the defense establishment to be very grave. During a situation assessment meeting on the Yitzhar incident, Israel's defense minister Moshe Ya'alon said that the attack Tuesday against Israeli security forces was terror as far as he was concerned, and that it needed to be treated as such. Ya'alon said, "To this end, we are using a strong hand against these criminals. We will not ignore violence against soldiers, police, or innocent Palestinians, and whoever chooses to behave this way will pay a price." Israel's ambassador to the United Nations sent a letter today to the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, as well as to the Security Council of the UN, demanding that the UN take action against terror group Hezbollah. This follows statements made earlier this week by Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, who admitted that his group was behind an attack on IDF forces this past March the 14th, when an IDF convoy was targeted with an explosive device near the Lebanese border on Har Dov. No soldiers were injured in that incident. Persor wrote in his letter that Nasrallah's declaration was more proof that Hezbollah continues to operate south of the Litani River, which is in violation of UN Resolution 1791. We lost several Jewish figures this week. A man who was considered one of the architects of the Oslo peace process passed away today at the age of 59. Ron Pundak died after a long battle with cancer. He played a strong role in the opening of the secret channels of communication between Israel and the PLO that ultimately led to the signing of the Oslo Accords in Washington in September of 1993. Pundak served also as chairman of the Israeli Peace NGOs Forum and as CEO of the Paris Center for Peace from 2001 to 2012. Israeli President Shimon Peres called Pundak a man of values who was a warrior for peace until his final breath. And earlier this week, a man who spent his life in the fight for Soviet Jewry passed away. Jacob Birnbaum, who founded the Student Struggle for Soviet Jewry, died on Wednesday at the age of 87. Birnbaum was born in Germany and escaped with his family to England when the Nazis came to power, later moving to New York in the 60s, where he began to raise the awareness of American Jewry on the oppression of Soviet Jews and to mobilize students in particular to advance the cause of Soviet Jewry, reclaiming the phrase, "Let my people go." Oxford historian Sir Martin Gilbert wrote of Birnbaum, "As a cautious, pedantic historian, I am naturally reluctant to call anyone the father of anything, but I have no hesitation whatever in describing Jacob Birnbaum as the father of the Soviet Jewry movement." The U.S. State Department announced yesterday that it is holding discussions with France regarding compensation for victims and their families of deportation during the Holocaust. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki said the negotiations concerned those who were deported by rail from France to Nazi labor and death camps by the French National Railway Company SNCF during the Holocaust. And Psaki urged state legislatures like New York and Maryland to avoid actions that undermine the current talks. She said the current American-French dialogue, in our view, represents the best means of reaching an agreement that will meet the concerns expressed by lawmakers in these states. Psaki was referring there to laws being considered by Maryland, New York, as well as Florida and California legislatures that would bar the French-owned SNCF from getting any state contracts until reparations are paid. The State Department feels that tying the two issues together presents an obstacle to the current talks. Business magnate Sheldon Adelson wants to help Israel get to the moon. Adelson and his wife have pledged $16.4 million to fund the Israeli Space IL mission. Space IL is a participant in the Google Lunar X Prize competition. They announced the donation this week, citing Dr. Miriam Adelson, saying that the couple was very excited to be supporting the effort to land the first Israeli spacecraft on the moon. Space IL is building the world's smallest spacecraft, the cost of which is estimated at approximately $36 million. And we end the news today with special birthday wishes to one of our viewers. Seymour Lubliner turns 101 this coming Monday, April the 14th, on the eve of Passover. We wish him much health and happiness ad 120 till 120. Happy birthday, Seymour. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Friday, April the 11th, 2014. Remember, live Shabbat services are coming up at 6 o'clock from New York City's Central Synagogue. I'm Teisha Bader. Shabbat Shalom.